first thing I wanted to ask you about with this is literally the beginning. The opening credits of Silo are so gripping visually and musically. And I was wondering, did you write that theme to the credit sequence, or did you already have it and then kind of splice it together?
No, I wrote the piece of music first, and and there was a long debate whether it's how long it should be, whether it should be 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds. And I thought to myself, you know what, I'm just gonna go for gold, make a 90-second version, send it to them, and hope for the best. And thankfully, it inspired something that, yeah, I think I'm really happy with it. I think it's really powerful. And so, yeah, I think in a sort of a rare example of the music kind of influencing the picture more than the other way around.
Oh, that's cool. And I mean, there's that theme, obviously, and then there are so many unique settings and important characters and stuff in this show. How did you determine what warranted its own like full out theme?
Oh dear. I have to admit that, well, I mean, I always knew Juliet had to have a theme. I wrote a theme that was sort of basically specifically for episode two, which sort of just became what I call the silo theme. And so there's sort of a combination of certain themes that were clearly intended and written for specific characters or situations, but some of it just kind of found its own life and found its own way of existing in the show, and at the end of the day, it's all about telling the story, and these things have a way to kind of work themselves out.
And I could easily be reading way too much into things, but something I really liked about the score is that nothing feels too heroic necessarily. It feels like it almost lives in the same gray area that a lot of the characters in the show does, which I think like is why all of it works so well. Is that kind of how you were thinking about it overall, or like what was I guess your mission statement as a composer for this?
Well, there really wasn't one. I mean, I just, when I first came on, I just was so gripped by the idea of being stuck inside of a big silo, underground, and not being able to go outside, and how the level of, I guess, just isolation and just, yeah. I mean, for me, I don't know. I just automatically went to kind of a dark place because it seems to me that wouldn't make you particularly happy in general. It's just claustrophobia, really, is kind of what I was going for. And I mean, particularly the first episode, it's kind of a tragic story, and I don't know. It just sort of led me down this dark path, I guess you could say. But I mean, I came on board because of my relationship with Morton Tilden, who directed the first three episodes, and we worked together before on a show called Defending Jacob for Apple. And my I guess my solo work is sort of like this, I guess, slightly gloomy kind of Scandinavian music, and I think actually I've just read this in interviews with Graham Yost sort of after the fact, that because I really just interfaced with Morton in the beginning, but Graham was attracted by the idea of sort of having this kind of dark Scandinavian music, and I mean, we joke about, like, I mean, I wrote a lot of it in Iceland, and growing up and living in Iceland in some ways maybe makes you slightly sort of, or weirdly well prepared for writing music for something like Silo, because it's dark, a large part of the year. I grew up in a small town. It can be a little isolating and lonely and even claustrophobic. So I don't know. I think just a lot of things came together, but at the end of the day, I mean, I didn't have that much time really to think about what I was going to do. So I think a lot of it just was just going with my gut instincts, and kind of, going with feeling more than thinking, really.
I was listening to some of your your own music. It was beautiful. I think it was, I don't know how you have the time to do that between like the Chicago shows and this, and like, it's insane. But do you write primarily on the piano? It seemed like,
It just depends on what I'm doing. I mean, I for my own music, I do, and I suppose, yeah, I probably do write primarily on the piano. But some things, I just try to really drag myself away from the piano because I think being a piano player and composing on the piano, you just sort of, it kind of paints you in a corner, and you tend to go and just, we all have a bag of tricks in a way, and you just sort of have to break away from those and have to break away from the comfort zone. So a lot of Silo was either just kind of written in my head or just using technology really, and just kind of, I recorded a lot of things beforehand, kind of built a library of recordings, and then just started messing with them. And I think, even though the technology we see in the silo is kind of old fashioned and deliberately looks like the early 80s or even the 70s in terms of computers and things like that, it runs on technology at the end of the day. And I think technology is a really important part of the silo. So, I just wanted to kind of be true to that without being, sort of, I mean, the idea was like, let's make electronic based music that doesn't necessarily sound like electronic music.
I think I just have a couple more quick ones for you if it's cool. But
No worries.
I know when this first came out, I mean, it's so its own thing, but I saw people, kind of comparing it to like the Fallout video game series. And then there's just so much great science fiction and science fiction music. Was there anything that you wanted to make sure you were avoiding when you were writing this?
No, I really didn't think about that. I mean, I think, again, in a way, there's two kind of extremes that I was working with in my head. One is just this sort of isolation of these individuals, and the other sort of end of the spectrum is this vast, huge silo. And when I first started getting footage, none of the CGI had been done. So you didn't see like this huge silo. It just looked like a few people walking around some stairs. And so I think I, in a way, kind of started overcompensating and writing music that was much larger than what I saw, because I couldn't imagine, I could imagine it, but you don't get that feeling until you see the scope of it. So yeah, in a funny way, it was about the extreme, just, ends of the spectrum.
Yeah. And I think this will be my last one, but I was wondering, I personally have a couple favorite cues of yours from this, but do you have a favorite scene that you were able to score from this series?
There's so many, to be honest. I mean, when the three scenes when people leave the silo obviously were really sort of rich material to work with. I really enjoyed scoring the scene where you see the what is it, like I think it's a brochure about Montana or Idaho, and it's like, you get this feeling that there used to be this world that doesn't exist anymore, and it's just kind of like my thinking with that was to sort of come up with something that almost sounded a bit Americana, almost like, Appalachian in nature, but still within this world of a silo. So that was something I really enjoyed doing. I mean, honestly, there's so many, like the whole generator, all those action sequences in episode 3 were just a beast to deal with, but really, really enjoyable.